I'm going to focus on one set of data that we get out of our expeditions. We've got a huge base of them. And so looking at what washes up on our beaches from the fishing trawler. So we're leaving the plastic out of this. And so we've got this huge bias in our perception of particularly your commercial fisheries, and it's validated with what you see. But what's interesting is as we walk along, we have different things washing up in different sections. So we've hiked in our first series of expeditions, we've hiked, as Jonathan said, 960 kilometers. We've gone from Grotto Beach to Cape Recife. We've got a bit of a gap there between the red dots and the blue dots, and that's one of our nemesis. We just can't get permission into there. So if anyone wants to collaborate with us and get us permission into the Denell site, that would be very greatly appreciated. But we've pretty much each of those dots is where we've done what we call a trashy 20 survey. So we devised that. It's every 5 kilometers. We do 3 10 by 2 meter transects, and that's primarily for plastic, but anything that's in there. Trashy 20 most common items that we find along the beach, and then we have obviously everything that we do see, we document. So we've done that section there. We've gone through a number of marine protected areas, 7 of them, and which is just over 30% of the coastal marine protected areas. There's 22 along the South African coastline. It's not just beach walking. The sandy beaches are, we look forward to them. There's a lot of scrambling, dead ends, cliffs, and then river crossings. This was with Jonathan there going across the river. That was the Dripkelders River, and everyone knows about Breede River and the sharks there, the bull sharks. And I just related how the largest bull shark that's ever been caught was in the Breede River. And as we crossed this river, one of our members, she was terrified. She stuck to me like a limpet, and she was convinced that all the Breede River bull sharks were going to swim out and come up the Dripkelders to snaffle us. But anyway, as part of the adventure, we've got 3 big crossings on our next expedition. So as I mentioned, we've gone through the different marine protected areas, and I'm just going to share with you what some of the stuff that washes up along those areas and how different marine protected areas attract different fisheries. So if we look at one of the things which was a big shock to us as we were going from Storms River through to Cape Recife on that expedition are squid jigs. And we all know that you've got the chocker industry located or focused around St. Francis Bay and Jeffreys Bay area. But what a lot of people don't realize is just the debris that washes out there. We would fill up a 5-liter bottle or 3 of them every day with squid jigs. And it's a massive loss. And so the highest density is along the coast, so towards Cape St. Francis there. Now what's interesting is if you look at the relation to this Tsitsikamma Marine Protected Area, all the dots are to the east of it. But what is interesting is we found a safety helmet from a sports industry that is operating at Storms River mouth. And it was a tragic event, it was a flood event, and one of the operators was washed out, lost his life, and obviously lost his helmet. And we found that, and it was 38 kilometers away from Storms River mouth. And so we had a metric of how far does something drift along the coastline. So that was something washing out of a flooding river and then going out. We don't know how far it went out to sea, but we had an idea. Now what's interesting is we take all those dots there, the green dots from west of Cape Recife, and we move them 38 kilometers. Most of them will sit within the protected area. So that tells us not that they're operating in the protected area. We can't validate that, but what it does tell us is that they're fishing adjacent or in the buffer zone of that protected area. So there's a huge amount of squid operation or fishing or chokka fishing is occurring there. But compare that to the western side. We've only had 2 records of squid jigs in the Cape Agulhas and round to Danger Point. So that's sort of, we have an idea where the fishing's occurring, and you don't have to walk 900 kilometers along the beach to find that. You could actually just go and ask the boats, but at least we've got some evidence now of what's washing up. Interestingly enough, I chatted to an ex-chokka fisherman. He had a whole set of boats, and I said, why would you lose all these squid jigs? And he said, simple thing, just economics. They go for the cheaper swivels. So for the saving of 3 or 4 rand, they go for a cheaper swivel and it breaks off. Now, that's information that needs to come out, because we can go to whoever's issuing the permits and say, well, you need a particular swivel to make sure that you don't lose these, because ingestion of these by pets on the beach or marine mammals is not going to end very nicely. You're going to have an expensive vet bill, and you're going to have fatal outcome from the ingestion for marine mammals. Crab pots. Crab pots are one of these things, and probably one of the most widely distributed that we've had there. Interestingly enough, a huge loss of crab pots occurs around the world annually. The estimate in Canada is that 40% of all deployed crab pots are lost per year. Now, in terms of ghost fishing, this is quite a terrible item to lose, because you put your bait in, your target species goes in, can't get out, perishes, becomes bait, and it carries on feeding. And they reckon that these things can feed for up to 10 months and act until they wash out. So it's quite a huge loss of target species and other species in an ecosystem just by the loss of this. And there's innovation in changing crab pot deployment and recovery. Gets a little bit expensive, but the long run is a much more beneficial product. So when we look at this, where are we finding them? As I say, pretty much all over the place. Once again, the Titicaca MPA is one of our high densities. So the most we got was on our 2022 expedition, which was Storms River to Cape Recife. And once again, look at where the dots are, move them 38 kilometers over, and a lot of them are seated within the MPA. And then that's assuming that's where they would have been lost, just taking that drift event. Interestingly enough, the Kokama MPA, in terms of density on the beach, the highest is of crab pots is in Kokama MPA. And, living there, see the vessels quite frequently. So you have this massive amount of crab pot washout actually in the reserve. So take that drift analysis over, they would be slightly more east of that particular MPA. But once again, you have to ask who's responsible for these crab pots, and how do you make a vessel accountable for them? And there's lots of mechanisms. You just have to look at the fishing industry in New Zealand and look at their checks and balances, their monitoring system. I've been a CAMLA scientific observer on boats and mostly on New Zealand vessels. So they've got a really great system. And, in South Africa, we need to have accountability. In Norway and Canada, I think you have to have your name on each of your crab pots. When it washes up, you get a bill for the recovery of that crab pot. And, so there are mechanisms to check up on and try and mitigate the loss of crab pots. Buoys, doesn't matter whether you're trawling, whether you're doing long lining, whether you're doing crab pots. There's different buoys, float buoys, marker buoys, beacon buoys, and all of that sort of thing, and even the beach buoys. But yeah, what I found fascinating about this, when you look at the map, we didn't see anything between Cape St. Francis and Cape Recife, which is quite interesting. And I can just present the data. The analysis is not something that I can delve into on that one. Need a lot more information. But what is interesting is looking around the Agulhas to Danger Point area. You've also got a sparse wash-up of buoys there. Which is when you consider, okay, I'll hang that thought, we'll get to the octopus traps. This was just a once-off thing. It was an experimental fishery, And so it was interesting, and it subsequently closed down. It had a huge amount of issues with entanglement with humpback whales. A lot of work went into worrying about where the ropes were between the traps, because it was like a bottom long line system with all the traps deployed. So you have down lines and then a line at the bottom, each of the traps attached to that. And they went for a low profile of drift, so it was weighted, and they had all those lethal entanglements that occurred. And they found, and it told us a lot about humpback behavior, unfortunately to the loss of, I think it was 4 humpbacks, but that they're going down and they're actually swimming under these ropes and getting entangled at that point. So anyway, the fishery then made modifications. They raised the rope, but they just found it was an experimental fishery and it wasn't pursued. But we have found those down at around Cape Agulhas. But interestingly enough, the 2 yellow dots up there, those are in the Kokama Marine Protected Area, and those have only washed out recently. So that gives you an idea of the longevity of some of these plastic traps, and think of crab traps as well, that get lost at sea, when the ropes get snagged on reef and that sort of thing. So that's just an interesting one, and it was thankfully a brief blip on the landscape, although the Spanish are now aquaculturing octopus. And after you've seen Craig Foster's program, you wonder if you want to eat octopus. But anyway, it's some people say they taste good with garlic. Okay, coming back to the other one is the previous one with the buoys, the trawl nets. This is quite interesting. We find bits and pieces of trawl nets. So we've only ever found 2 entire trawl nets, small ones, or sections of net, but most of it's small pieces of net. And it's like, you can see where repairs have been done to nets, or they've been used as, not so much like cargo nets, but not a cargo net, but actually using net for that. And we kept on finding things like this on the beach, and we weren't sure what it was until about 2 years ago we realized they were FADs, so fish aggregation devices. Sneaky way for fishermen to do fishing outside the MPAs, and I've gone past my time. I didn't even see all the other flags. Okay, so that's the distribution of the trawl nets. We've got ropes. I just want to take a bit more time here. So monofilament, everything's commercial fishing that I've covered. This is something that a lot of people discount. We think that the fishermen on the shore bass don't discard. We've had a huge amount of that, and the ghost fishing, so we've documented 12 species killed by ghost fishing from snagged monofilament or recreational fishing tackle. And the worst is from Cape Agulhas through to Danger Point. We've never seen amounts of monofilament as we've seen there. So your commercial fishery plays a role, but your recreational fishing as well. And there's a whole lot of QR codes, but I haven't got time. But thank you very much, everybody.